As a student majoring in art history, I had a relative understanding of the growth of photography into motion picture cinema. Conceptually, I can imagine the revolution in society to see that a scene in real life could be perfectly replicated, almost a global cultural shockwave. The invention of photography would forever change the purpose of previous mediums such as painting or sculpting. Suddenly, new generations would see photographs of grandparents just as they were, even if the child was not alive to meet them. At this point, humans encapsulated the still life image perfectly. So where could they improve it further? Inventors and entrepreneurs jumped at this opportunity, and our world has not slowed since. Starting off with Joseph Nicephore Niespi, who is a leader and pioneer in photography in 1814 through 15, as he experimented with asphalt's reaction to sunlight exposure to create one of many of the first pictures. Some sources credit a photo on pewter of a windowsill as being the first heliograph. That is this pictured here. Within our course's lecture, we learned that Niespi's first photograph from the camera box, created around 1825, titled Man with a Horse. That one I will picture now. From my research, it is my understanding that artist Louis Daguerre of France was also attempting to create a permanent image, and in 1829 formed a partnership with Niespi. After Niespi's death in 1833, Daguerre continued his experiments and created a chemically intensive process which involved copper, silver, iodine, and mercury, and developed the daguerreotype. Louis would sell his process to the government, allowing anybody who wanted to create daguerreotypes to have the access and information to do so. Fast forward not much further to the person that this paper and assignment is actually about. George Eastman was born in Waterville, New York, in 1854. The same year, his father, George Washington Eastman, would establish the Eastman's Commercial College in Rochester, New York. The family moved to Rochester, and sadly, in 1868, George Eastman Sr. would pass away. George Eastman himself later became a bank clerk in Rochester when it was suggested by a colleague that he bring a camera on an upcoming vacation. He purchased his photographic outfit, which I later found out was the camera box and various components for development of the photo. I'll include an example photo here of a traditional photographic outfit from 1850, so I can't find an exact image of what he used, but I can guess that it looks similar to this. Oddly, George never went on his trip and actually became engrossed in photography. The outfit seemed to bother Eastman, as his chief reason for seeking improvements was because the gear was awkwardly shaped, inconvenient to carry, and probably broke very easy. After 3 tedious years of experimenting with gelatin emulsions, George Eastman in 1880 created the dry coating machine and received financial support from Rochester businessman Henry Strong in 1881, so only a year later. His product was later the first roll film. This company would be called the Eastman Dry Plate Company, and then in 1887, the market for paper film was just booming. George's last rebrand in 1892 called the company the Eastman Kodak Company, otherwise known by my generation and 2000s pop culture simply as Kodak cameras, which were meant to produce 10 to 27 photos for pretty cheap. The concept of motion picture was developed largely in part by a man I feel. His name was Edward Muybridge. He would create stereographs in 1872 showing a slight misalignment that would actually be later called chronophotography. Muybridge would expand on this using sequential photography, which involved taking pictures of a subject as they were in motion and then piecing those together to create or imitate movement. In combination with George Eastman's roll film slowly becoming more flexible with improvements, the concept of motion pictures was on the horizon. Unfortunately, though, according to the Eastman Museum as one of my sources, in the late 1920s, Eastman was diagnosed with a progressive and irreversible spinal disease, and on March 14, 1932, he ended his own life. In a note to friends, he wrote, "My work is done, why wait?" Although it was very unfortunate, my understanding of technical men and industrialists of his age is that they're very binary, yes or no, 0 or 1 people. They want to have control over their lives and what is about to happen. And so, in his life, he made tons of generous contributions and technical advancements, but most notably played a role, like another American capitalist, Henry Ford, whose assembly lines and low prices made Ford vehicles available to almost all income classes. In the same way, George Eastman experimented and expanded to allow hundreds of thousands to enjoy photography, which he himself stumbled upon loving too.